we've got one other sort of advanced topic that is worth knowing about. For our final bit of chapter 5, this is sort of in the optional sense in that you can get by without it, but it's a really nice illustration of thinking about reusable queries and how active record as a philosophy works. And these are scopes that exist in our models. So when we think about the types of queries that we might want to run to create better experiences in our app, we might ask questions, how do I find all the movies that are appropriate for kids, or the movies that have, at least some number of reviews? What about all movies where the average rating is above 5 potatoes or is 5 potatoes if our scale is 1 to 5? What are the most recently reviewed movies? And what if I want the most recently highly rated movies for kids? How do I do that without sort of banging my head against the wall? Well, it turns out that Rails has a really nice set of functionality that builds on top of the querying interface that we've been practicing with. And these are called scopes, which allow stacking or chaining. So I get to say something like movie.forkids.withgoodreviews with maybe some argument 3. That specifies a minimum rating of 3 stars, or 3 potatoes in this case. Maybe I have a scope called movies with many fans that have been recently reviewed. And so the goal here is that we want to think about what are the common things that we might want to do with the model, and how do we extract out that functionality. So Rails calls these scopes, and the nice thing is they're evaluated lazily, so we can chain and stack as many of them as we would like. They're useful for common patterns across multiple queries and places. So comments, I might soft delete data, so I might be able to say movies.deleted movies perhaps, or movies.hidden movies to access common queries, whatever our needs might be. So how does this work in our model? Well, Rails provides a method called scope, and we give it essentially 2 arguments, the name of the scope and a lambda or a function which executes that query when the time is needed. So if I say scope for kids, this little syntax here, Ruby calls the stabby lambda, which is, I think, the greatest name for a bit of syntax. But it's just an anonymous function, which has a body of where rating is G or PG. And what's nice about this is what goes in the context of these functions is really just a continuation of the active record syntax that you might be using elsewhere in your models or controllers. So this will give me a method called forKids on a movie that, when executed, will essentially append this where condition to the query that I'm running. I can simply ask for, let's say, movies with good reviews. And this one is maybe a little more interesting because it includes something like a cutoff as an argument that allows us to say, whatever I need to define as good reviews. Maybe you have a slider in your application, right, that lets users dynamically filter their preferred rating for movies. They can drag it from 0 to 5, and you could pass in whatever they drag their slider to a nice query. And similarly, perhaps movies recently reviewed with another argument, n. This one is kind of fun. If I say n equals 7 here, I have a default argument, which allows me to optionally specify a number of days. So those are active record scopes.